Welcome to Growth with Portia, a weekly conversation for your personal and professional growth. Here is your host, Portia Booker.
Hey listeners, welcome to Growth with Portia. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. So question for you, did you bring your curious mind today? If so, I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's dive in. This conversation is episode 4 in the part 2 series of honoring my beloved mother, Sharonne Lopez, who made her transition from Earth on July 7, 2022. So today I'm joined by an overcomer once bound by the shackles of trauma from failed relationships and life events. Now, free from those wounds, she's on a mission to create a community of empowered women who will stand in their truth, live an authentic life full of purpose. So welcome, intuitive trauma coach, Miss Alta Felix. How are you doing today, Alta?
I am doing great. Such a wonderful introduction, Portia. Thank you for that.
Well, thanks for joining me. I mean, come on, we got to get more people out of that space of being bound by life traumatic events to a place of triumph, right? So, Alta, I'd love to start off my conversations with gratitude. What are you grateful for today?
Oof, so many things. I'm going to start by saying I am grateful for the relationship that I am building with my spirit team, with myself, with my spirituality. That is the number one thing that I am grateful for, because there's no end to the journey, but to see the evolution of the path and the way things have evolved since I decided that I wanted to get on this healing journey is just a beautiful thing. So today I'm going to say my number one thing that I'm grateful for right in this very moment is the relationships that I'm building.
And let's touch more on that, Alta. I mean, because let's be honest, when it comes to elevation, right, we all don't reach a certain period or point in our life by just a one-person band show. And so for you, Alta, what would you say is the one thing from your support team or your spiritual relationships that keeps you afloat even on the hard days?
Knowing that nothing happens for no reason. Like knowing that there's literally a purpose behind everything, good or bad, and understanding and accepting that even if I don't cognitively understand it in the moment, I have had enough evidence to be able to say that, yeah, it'll be fine. Right now it feels hard. And I get to be with that. Like I get to be with that hardness, that all those feelings. And I also get to remind myself that this is just a step in the journey.
100%. I am also in alignment with you on that every event, every person we meet, each and everything serves a purpose, no matter what. There's a book that I often reference. It's the book called The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. And one of the things that she says in that book is man is not your enemy. Man is not your friend, for man is your teacher. And that to me spans across a universal meaning of every event, every person, every circumstance is a lesson if you're open to it, right? Because like when we talk about relationships, right, I got to touch on this. People tend to keep falling into that same hamster wheel of attracting that same person. They may look different, but there may be some other things that are very similar to the previous person or persons they've had, depending on longevity of the relationship and that. But they continue to fall into that because, again, they haven't learned they haven't learned to set those boundaries to not keep attracting that same energy, that same replica of what they didn't want. But that's for a whole nother day. We'll touch on that.
I love that. Let's go down that road. But no, the only thing I'll add to that is they just haven't learned the lessons. So the universe, the creator, God, source will continue to bring certain situations up over and over and over and over again because you haven't learned the lesson. And so the spiritual journey, the human journey, in my opinion, is to get back to understanding what is the purpose of your life here. What are the trials and tribulations that you're going through that are meant to teach you lessons that you're meant to grow through that you haven't yet grown through? Because this is your soul's evolutionary journey. And so we can have a conversation about that another day, but that understanding really created the space for me to do the work that was necessary for me to begin my healing journey.
And Alta, that rolls right into my next question for you is, obviously in my introduction of you, I mentioned that you went from this space of being a prisoner of all of the traumas in your life, from the failed relationships to, of course, life events that occur within our lives. And of course, with us being women, there's unique things that occur, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you go from that space, Alta, from being a prisoner of trauma to triumph in your healing endeavors?
Oh, that was a conscious decision. I'll just say that first. Because I think people are waiting for it to be right, for it to feel right, or whatever, right? There's certain points in our lives where there are catalysts that create space for us to experience change and transformation. For me, that moment in time was walking away from my third abusive relationship and starting that by saying, oh, why does this keep happening to me? I'm a good woman. I have a job. I cook. I take care of the kids. I'm good in bed. Like I watch football. I have all these things checked off. And I still keep getting these men that were so abusive to me. So abusive. And in that, I learned how to be abusive, right? Because I had to learn how to survive. And that was something that I didn't realize in the moment. And so when I walked away from that last relationship and I started to ask that, why me? Why me? At some point, and I don't really remember the exact point, but at some point, I was able to take a step back and really ask the question, not from a pity, why me, but from a like, why is this happening to me? Why do I keep going through the same over and over and over again? They're all different people. So why do I keep ending up with the same mess? And what I found was me. I was the common denominator in all of those situations. And so in order for me to change my life and the world outside of me and what I wanted to attract or be and what I thought I deserved, there were things I needed to work on within myself. And that was the beginning for me.
Alta, I want to go back to what you mentioned about having all the boxes checked off, right? I mean, you've got the nice house, the nice car, you like sports. I mean, that's already a sold point, right? Because a lot of men tend to like sports. I mean, I like basketball. To me, I find football a little too slow for me, but we all have our forte. And so, Alta, for other women who have been in your boat that also have all those check marks checked off, but yet they still keep landing in that hamster wheel of attracting what they don't want, how would you say they should go about evaluating themselves? Because like you said, the common denominator is me. It's not them, it's me. So what would you say is a key question they should ask themselves in this transitional journey?
Well, the first step I would say is objectively analyze your relationships. How did you attract the partners that you attracted? What happened during the relationship? How were you showing up throughout the relationship? How did your life change while you were in that relationship, right? Really analyzing who were you before the relationship, who were you throughout the relationship, and then looking at who you are now, right? And the point of that is to get back to who you are. Because what I have found to be a common denominator in people who are in toxic, abusive relationships is we lose ourselves, right? We lose who we are and we become whoever we think we need to be to make that relationship last, to keep everything easy, keep the peace, so on and so forth. And what I realized is that by doing that, I was actually contributing to creating a toxic environment within my relationships, because I was saying to the other person, I don't value me more than I value you. right? I don't value my joy more than I value your joy, right? My whole existence is this relationship. All these things that are wrong. So that's where I would start, is assess where you were before. And I mean, press rewind. I don't want to repeat myself. Press rewind, go back if you can, and ask yourself the questions that I provided.
Hey, short and simple, right? I mean, and realistically, Alta, I think we block our own blessing, right? When we stay in those boats of comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of making that conscious decision, like what you mentioned, to embark on that journey, right? And I think more of us need to adopt that student for life mentality when it comes to any area of our life that looks a little dusty. We gotta clean it off, like they say in was it the Next Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Time to shine up some areas in your life. And if relationships tend to be the one that's the rusty penny, okay, you got to find your Pepsi to help remove that rust, but you have to make the conscious decision to be the one to put the penny in the Pepsi to stop it from rusting,
Yes, exactly what you just said.
And I think it's time, though. I feel like we live in such an abundant time in our life where we have more flexibility with our lives, right? Whether we are an entrepreneur or we part-time in corporate, we have that ability to have the life that we want versus being spoon-fed the common prescription algorithm of the American dream that we've all been fed, right?
Exactly.
We have that opportunity to really live an enriched life. And so, Alta, for you, what maybe piece of advice would you give for our listeners to really realize the abundance that they have in the world today?
That is such a great question. That is such a great question. And I'm going to just go with the first thing that popped into my mind, and it was come back to your breath. Come back to your breath. And it sounds so simple. Why breathe all the time? I'm breathing, I don't even got to think about it. That's the problem. Because we're so in busy mode or go mode, or we're activating high tone dorsal vortex, right? So we're in this freeze state, fawn state. We're binge watching TV all day and binge watching this thing all day, and not realizing that that we're not connected with the world that we're living in, this abundant world that we're living in, and also defining what is abundance to you. I think that's critical too. What is abundance to you? But to me, it's being able to lay in my hammock in my yard with the fire burning and listen to the breeze as it blows across the leaves on the trees. It's listening to the pool, like the water splashing. It's the presence. And so, coming back to the breath allows you to come back to the present moment.
In that order, 100%, Alta. I couldn't agree more, because we don't realize just because we wake up every day and we're breathing, do we actually take in that we have a purpose than to just exist. Exactly. You're every day you're waking up, you have a chance to make a difference, make an impact, instead of just, like you said, take the fawn approach to life and just binge watch Netflix the minute you get off work. No, there's more to your life than just binge watching Netflix and just existing. So on that note, we're going to take our first quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. Everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm joined remotely with Miss Alta Felix, and we're just having a great conversation, of course, about living an abundant life and what does a life of abundance look like for you. So, Alta, look, you are literally a Jacqueline of many trades. And one of your trades happens to be in the space of Reiki. And as we know, Reiki is a unique healing technique or modality. So maybe, Alta, for our listeners who are tuning in, can you paint a picture of what Reiki looks like and how it is beneficial in a healing space?
Okay, great. That's a great question. So I think I want to start before I even jump into Reiki and just say that there are multiple modalities available to everyone to access, cultivate, and experience healing. Reiki happens to be one of those. And the Reiki practice, it's an ancient Japanese practice, and it's the process of channeling universal life force energy through the practitioner's body, through their hands to the client, and allowing that light, and like my hands feel activated right now as I just said that, right? So allowing the light energy to flow through the person, and trusting and knowing that the creator, this beautiful energy is actually moving through this person's body, going where it needs to go, removing blocks, clearing whatever needs to be cleared, and creating space for the body to heal, right? So the body heals when it's in this relaxed state of being. And so the Reiki comes in to allow you to experience this relaxed state of being, which then allows your body's natural healing resources to activate and start to do the work. So a lot of times after Reiki, some people might experience coughing, tiredness, thirst, things of that, headaches, like little things, but that's the detoxing process, right? That's the body getting rid of the stuff it needs to get rid of. And one of the things that I've learned is like a client farting, burping, laughing, crying are all beautiful things, right? Because that's the process of release. So that's Reiki in a very, very summarized way.
Alta, thanks for painting that picture, because I want to go back to one thing that you said about the body heals when we're slowed down. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they tell you when you're sick to sleep and rest, but I think we also need to incorporate more meditative practice, mindfulness into our day, and not having a mind that's full, just being mindful. Mm-hmm. And Alta, why do you think that in our society, we've reached a point where rest is undervalued, but productivity is valued?
Well, I think it's because of the world we live in. We live in a world that's all about consumerism. We live in a capitalist society. And so that's what's been pushed. That's what's been drilled into everyone's heads. We have a school system that is designed, yes, to educate, but also to train us to be busy workers, right? To be busy, to always have things to do, to memorize, to be punished when we don't meet those metrics, so on and so forth. And so we live in a society that's like that. And people tend to live in one extreme or the other, right? Either they're going all in and they're going hard and they're trying to continue to do great and create wealth for themselves. And then there's a group of people that are just like, F it, it's never going to work out for me. So they do nothing. And it's all just a misalignment, like a misalignment. Humans are the only living creatures on this planet that no longer are connected with their true purpose. The lion still does what the lion has always done. The ant still does what the ant has always done. The butterfly has done what the butterfly has always done. We are no longer connected with the universal world that we live in. And I think that is part of the issue too.
And so, Alta, how do you think we can go back to that, putting rest and stillness in the forefront of a society that is constantly on the go? Because like you said, we're connected virtually, digitally, internationally through means of podcasting, social media, but there's a disconnect from ourselves. So how can we reach that level or reach a point where we're able to disconnect from the masses, but reconnect with ourselves in order to live out our purpose?
Great question. I'm going to say that community is important here, because we live in a society, or a society is a group of people that agree to a social contract to live a certain way, behave a certain way, do certain things, so on and so forth. So the majority of the world is in agreement with these social norms. And so when you are choosing to do something else, to wake up a little slower in the morning, right? To not rush to go be somewhere, maybe not even use an alarm and let the sun wake you up in the morning, which means take your curtains down, right? But we live in a place that's hard because we have so much light pollution, right? So most people have curtains to allow themselves to rest, but it's this finding community so that you can feel supported as you're breaking away from the societal norms. I think that's going to be critical. And community can look like anything. It could be you and your best friend together saying every day we're going to get on the call, and for 5 minutes, we're just going to breathe. It could look like every evening finding a meditation class in your area and going to it. If you can't go, find one online. There's a bunch of them, paid, free, all types. You have to consciously, actively seek these things out. And what happens is once you start to do that, once you start to actively seek it out and you're vocalizing it and you're putting energy, you're putting movement behind what you believe in, the universe, spirits, God will start to show you the way, right? They'll start to be more blatant about, oh, try this thing, do this thing, go to this path. Back to the Reiki, like that's how I found shamanic Reiki, because I was never attracted to Reiki. I've always been attracted to the shamanism aspect. And so when I found shamanic Reiki, I was like, okay, got it. You want me to do it, and you want me to do it in this way. This is my path. So this is my journey back to me, my journey cultivating me. So for you, it would be similar. Once you start to speak what you desire, which is that slowing down and breaking out of the rat race, you create space for more.
100%, because now it's focused. Your energy is on a narrowed path versus you're putting too many, what they say, irons in the fire at one time. So literally you have so many things burning to the point that you're burning the candle at both ends, instead of having that one tailored path or one tailored focus where you're able to really indulge 100%. And then you're able to hear that reinforcement voice, whether, like you said, it's source, God, whatever you believe in, that's telling you, hey, stay here. You're doing amazing work.
Exactly.
And I can say that's been the case for me, Alta. I mean, it's been definitely a journey to get to where I am today, because let's be honest, when we work in corporate, there's aspects of our corporate life that we love, right? There's aspects or responsibilities in the job that we love, but are we really truly passionate every single day, right? When I was a TV producer, I loved the aspect of being able to say, oh yeah, I worked for a big network. I'm able to share stories, but there was that point of, but I'm not sharing the stories I want. And here's the disconnect right there, because I have one portion of what I want, but it's not the whole package deal. And so how can I reach that point of having that full have your cake and eat it too moment?
Yeah. I feel like it's beautiful the way you just phrased it, right? Because you're not alone in that. And I think it comes down to trust, faith, if you're religious, right? It comes down to that, the belief, and knowing what you desire, and not as in knowing what you want to do, but knowing how you want to exist in the world.
Tenfold. I got to ask you this, Alta, too. You mentioned about trust and faith, and I feel as though trust and faith comes with surrendering to that expectation that you have control over every single step, every single encounter, every single portion of your road to your true purpose and calling. And what would you say, Alta, it took for you to be able to reach that level of trust where you surrender to the ways of the universe to guide you through?
I love that. And I love the word surrender. The reason I love this so freaking much is because it has been a part of this journey, right? Like with the shamanic Reiki, I go into the session, me as a practitioner, I go into the session having to surrender and having to trust, right? If I come into the session with any intention other than opening space for you to heal, I'm already tainting the space, right? Because I'm putting my expectations on it. And so it's not about me. I'm the hollow reed, right? So that's a surrendering to believe, one, that I'm a hollow reed, two, to believe that the person is going to get what they need. They're going to get what they need. I don't need to put intentions. And three, to believe the things that I see when I'm doing these sessions, because some amazing, beautiful things happen on my end as I'm doing it. And when I'm thinking about the other person, you know, the client, they're in this space of surrendering too. They're in this space of trusting too. And so this is why it's important to either find community or try these different modalities, because in that moment of us working together, of us doing Reiki together, you're going to relax and you're going to get to experience the way your guides, the way God, universe speaks to you. And when I think about the Black community and even the Latin community, like Reiki is foreign, shamanic Reiki is foreign to them. Shamanism, maybe not so much, but the shamanic Reiki in general is, because they don't have the words for it. But what I want to say, it's, you know how when someone gets sick or everybody wants to pray for somebody and they put their hands on that person and they're channeling all this love and God, and that's Reiki, right? That's what Reiki is. It's the laying of hands on you to create the space for you to begin to surrender, to have faith, to have a cathartic experience and release whatever is within you.
And I love that explanation, Alta, 100%. I mean, because we have to put a concreteness to what I would call abstract or taboo concepts, because you're right. In certain communities, especially in communities of color, Reiki, therapy, TMS, any of those healing modalities can sound foreign, and people become intimidated and afraid because they're like, I don't know what this is. But I just love the fact that you literally brought it home with, if someone is sick, we're praying for them. Prayer is an equivalent to Reiki. You're laying your hands on this person. Heavenly Father, help this person get well, etc. So I'm thankful that you were able to really bring that home and really help other people to see that nothing really is foreign. It's all about your approach and the way that you explain it. So we're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. Everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm joined remotely with Ms. Alta Felix, and we were just wrapping up the last segment with the importance of learning how to surrender, and also about the demystifying Reiki as a therapy modality. So Alta, I gotta touch on this. I gotta touch on grief, because as I mentioned, I'm doing this series part 2 in honor of my mom, who transitioned on July 7th. And so what I found personally is I found myself apologizing for crying when I'm talking to either one of my coaches or mentors when I get emotional about my mom. And so, Ulta, for you, why do we apologize in general for crying or showing emotion? What is that? Please explain.
I love the question. And my opinion on that is back to the world we live in. There's no space for it. There's very little space for people to cry, and for people to feel their emotions and not be judged for them. And so when we don't want to be judged, I'm sorry. I apologize. It wasn't, and so you might not consciously be doing it now, but you've learned this behavior in your childhood, right? In your life to constantly apologize, right? So that you remain safe, right? It's like a safety response. I'm sorry. I want to stay safe. I don't want you to be angry. I don't want you to not want to talk, all the things that might come up. And so when I think about that, I believe that needs to change. And a lot of the reason why people can't hold space, well, some people can't hold space for people when they are crying, is because they haven't allowed themselves to feel those things either. And so other times we're apologizing, like I said, just because it's been our automatic response to apologize, right? To make sure the other person isn't feeling threatened, intimidated, disgusted, whatever might be coming up or what we think might be coming up for the other person. And so we apologize. We frequently apologize for lots of things, right? Including our children, whatever. But crying is such a natural thing. It's such a natural thing. It's the way my coach put it. It was so eloquently stated. She said, tears are an expression for the soul that words cannot describe. Because I've cried in sessions sometimes, right? Like it's important to have your squad. I've cried, and she always holds space for it. And so it's the same thing, right? We apologize because we just don't know that we don't have to sometimes. And we need to get everyone to that point.
I love the description, expression of your soul that words can't describe. Perfectly stated. And I can say for me, I noticed that some days I have the crying spells where it's the Waterworks show on replay. I mean, literally, the Waterworks show ain't taking a commercial break. They've paid for full advertisement all day, and it ain't nothing I can do about it. I mean, literally, Alta, I can tell you some days I'm ironing my clothes and I have to make sure that I'm not crying on my clothes, especially if it's a white shirt or, a pink shirt or something where obviously it will show up. So it's like I'm sitting there crying boo-hoo and still moving forward. But I will say, even though while I'm functioning in the space of crying, I notice afterwards, I feel 10 times lighter. And I used to struggle really heavily with giving myself permission to cry because, like you said, we don't hold space for people. But also for me, I grew up with the certain expectation that crying equals weakness. You're not allowed to be weak. Like I mentioned this on a podcast interview that I did a few weeks ago about the strong Black woman connotation is negative. We're not supposed to be the strong one 24/7, 365. Unless you're going to write me a check for every single hour, then okay. But until then, that is not the norm.
Right.
And I've had to do a lot of work on myself in that area to give myself permission. And now that I do, it has definitely freed my soul. And also, how can we really paint the picture, really enforce or tell people the benefits of allowing themselves to show their emotion? Because it comes out physically for some. And so how can we really reinforce or bring that back, that crying is healthy instead of it continuing to be looked at in the light of that it's a bad thing to show?
Yeah. Oh, that really hurts my heart to think about that, because you mentioned the Black community, right? People of color, especially the Black community. There is this belief that tears make mean you're weak, right? Like you're weak if you cry. And God, that just hit home for me, because I think about my partner and, his life, and, I can see it. Like I can see that belief. And so when I'm thinking about answering your question, I'm going to answer it as if I'm talking to him, because I feel like that's the way I'm going to be able to get to the root. And so my answer to that, oof, boy, this is hard. This is hard because there's so many layers here, right? So the first layer is safety. They need to feel safe, right? You need to feel like the person who's sitting across from you is someone who isn't going to judge you or criticize you. And so, all right, this just popped into my head. Someone has to be the bigger person. Someone's going to have to cry first. Someone is going to have to cry first and hold themselves in front of somebody else to give that person permission. Right? Or both of you might just sit there, both looking at each other, wanting to cry, but not being able to. Right? So that was the first word that came into my mind, was safety, needing to create a sense of safety, someone needing to be the bigger person in a situation. I'm very grateful that my partner has no issues crying in front of me, but I see the trauma of that, and him trying sometimes to pass that down to our sons, and me constantly pushing back and saying, no, like I have space for their tears. I have space for their disappointment. I have space. So bam, the moms. I just answered it. The mothers. We need the mothers. And if you're one of the mothers that isn't allowing yourself to cry, then it's something that that you would need to do, right? That you need to work on. You find your community, find your sisters, find your squad, and then open that door, right? Vulnerability is critical.
Oh, hands down. I mean, being vulnerable is a unique superpower, I can say, because even for me, it took me a little bit of time to be vulnerable enough to even shed a tear in front of my coaches, in front of my mentors. I was one of those people that had to, quote unquote, put on the strong Black woman cape, because that's what I'm accustomed to doing 24/7. But after my mom, even when my mom was still alive, I still wore that badge of armor that was really more so the crown of thorns around my neck. And I'm grateful that I was able through this process to shed that ideology. And it's a work in progress still, Alta. But I'm grateful that I'm able to really hold space for myself, and also give that same platform to others who I can tell are bound by that negative connotation from the way that they grew up.
Oof, boy, as you were speaking, it just hit me on my chest. Grief without tears is an interrupted process. That just hit me on my chest.
Ooh, I can feel that, because I know for the longest time, and even though my mom hasn't been gone for very long, but I know that I wrestled with that, where I was so angry. And I have my days where I'm like, hey God, we got a little problem. Mm-hmm. But I remember in the very beginning how angry I was, to the point that I could not even shed a tear. It's like, what's that? You crying? Mm-hmm. What for? There's mm-hmm. no reason to be crying. You're angry.
I love that.
You can't shed tears when you're angry. So we think.
Mm-hmm. So I cry the most when I'm angry.
You and me both, because it's like, why? Believe me, I get that, Alta, because you're so angry to the point that none of the words make sense. You just want to either like punch this person or whatever, break something to the point that you're just like, why did you push me to this extreme? Like,
yes.
So I know exactly what you mean. And even with me through this grief process, I'm grateful, knock on wood. I got to give a shout out to my therapist. My therapist has just been thebomb.com with helping me to really learn how to channel my emotions and get them out of my system. And one, recognizing them, right? Because for the longest time, I wasn't able to recognize whether this was anger, was this sadness, was this depression, was this excitement? What is this emotion? So now that my therapist, who has really been working with me through that, has helped me to identify, they sent me one of those emotional wheels. So whenever I do my homework for them, my therapist is amazing because they give me homework every day to do, but it helps me so much to process the emotions and also learn how to channel them into an activity, learn how to convert it, right? So for example, if I'm angry, okay, if I'm feeling super angry at the world where I want it to burn down and catch on fire, all the great things, right? Okay, I'm going to take that energy and compile it into something. So a lot of my creative projects have come from some of my anger, some of my sadness. So really learning how to take your emotions instead of letting them overtake you, learn how to take them and produce something with them is what I'm forever grateful that my therapist has showed me how to do.
You said a few things here that I want to touch on, and I know we're on a time, so I'll go really quickly. So the first thing that I want to say is anger is a second emotion, right? And a lot of people don't even recognize that. They feel angry and they think that's it. And it's like, no, anger is what happens after you felt something else. So either you felt humiliated, sad, alone, whatever, then you became angry because you didn't know how to process that. So I know I always tell my clients that anger is a second emotion. Can you create space to figure out what came first? Because that's the one we're working with. The second thing is that every emotion has a high frequency and a low one. Every emotion has a high vibration and a low vibration. So anger at its lowest vibration creates destruction. And anger at its highest vibration creates movements, creates change. And so with love, it's the same thing. Love at its lowest vibration is attachment, negative attachments, right? Attachments where you can't even cultivate it yourself. You're taking it from others. And love at its highest vibration is when you're oozing it out of your pores, right? And so every emotion has a high and a low vibration. And so what I say that to say that there is no such thing as a negative emotion. They're just emotions. And the meaning, what we put to them is what creates the whole quote unquote negative or positive. And I love that you're working with your therapist to allow you to figure out how to cultivate it. And to that point, you can work with anyone. You can work with a therapist, a coach, a Reiki practitioner, a yoga teacher. You can do anything. But if you don't leave and do the work, you've done nothing. You literally just cracked it open and then you walked away. The work starts after, right? The sessions, the meetings, the conversations are all like the tilling of the soil and planting of the seeds, the pulling of the weeds, but the watering, the making sure that the soil is being that you're putting nutrition into the soil, that you're watching it, you're making sure that it's healthy, happens after the session. So I love what you said, that she gave you homework, but it's you that's doing it every day.
And like you said in the very beginning, it was a conscious decision. You have to be open to it and you have to hold yourself accountable to do the work in order to see the miracle happen. So we're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. everybody. Welcome back right here on Group Portia. Well, Alta, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much food for thought with our listeners today. If one of our listeners, Alta, was interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, is there a social media handle or website you can share with us today?
Yeah, so you can follow me at on Instagram at R2, the letter E, coach, R2E coach on IG. That's also my website, r2ecoach.com.
Excellent. Excellent. It makes me think of R2D2 for some reason. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but I know there's no like correlation, but I'll leave that there. I'll definitely
love it.
Alta, I gotta ask this, through the grief process for a lot of people, including myself, there tends to be a lot of support given, but sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so, Alta, what advice maybe can you give to family members and friends of someone who is grieving on how to support them but not overwhelm them?
Great question. Wonderful questions today. So thank you for that. What kind of advice would I give them now? I'm such a nerd, so I'm automatically like titration and going back to the nervous system. However, in English, I think it's a two-way street. I think the person who is grieving needs to be very clear about what kind of support they need. But if they're just in a space where they can't be, then you as a helper, as a support system, can simply ask the question, is there anything I can do to support you, including leaving you alone, bringing you a meal? Do you just want me to listen? So that's one question that I ask my clients all the time when they call or they need support. Do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to help you find a solution or strategize or think through this? Like, how can I be most supportive for you right now? And so that would be what I would tell the support system people, would be to just ask the question, right? Don't assume that the person wants your advice. Don't assume that they want you to bring over food. They might not be hungry, they might not eat it, then they feel bad because they didn't eat it and they have to throw it away. So don't assume anything and just ask. And it could be a short message, and always offer the person an option to either not respond or to not accept whatever you're offering, because people sometimes feel guilty saying no. So putting that out there, that no is an option and it's totally cool, I think is also very supportive.
100%, Alta. And thanks for sharing that, because I know for me, it was very overwhelming in the very beginning, all the messages on all my social media handles. And that's why sometimes on occasion I'd have to put out a video, say, hey guys, thank you so much for all the love and support, but Portia needs time right now. Portia just needs time. Please understand, this is a very sensitive and transitional period for me to adjust to. So just give Portia a minute. So thanks for definitely sharing that, Alta. I appreciate it. Alta, I gotta ask you this. I mean, come on now. You wear so many hats. I mean, you're the Reiki practitioner, you're also a mother, you're also a coach. I mean, so Alta, how do you find that balance between your passion for helping other people go from trauma to triumph and also maintaining your own mental well-being?
Regulation. Regulation, boundaries. And I'm so happy you said that, because I wrote down grief equals transition equals grief. So we're constantly grieving in our lives. And so learning how to do that in a way that is most supportive for you, I think, is critical. And it's a beautiful skill to have. And it comes down to what they call titration, but titration and pendulation. But what I like to describe it as is the way that I describe it to my clients is elevating your frequency, creating space for joy so that you have the capacity to hold space for yourself in grief. And so when I'm managing all of the things, I'm very clear about the days I don't work. about the days that when I'm not responding, when I'm going on vacation, not to anyone have any expectations of me, to really clearly communicating those things, but also honoring myself, So if I went through a really difficult time in May, I was going through some really expansive spiritual growth faster than I think I was fully ready to handle. And that caused my body to kind of go haywire. And so I had to create space for that. And the way that I did that is just, I communicated to my clients, hey, I cannot show up for you in the way that you need me to right now, because I really need to show up for myself. So I'm going to have to reschedule our session. Right. And the same goes for my family. I can't cook dinner right now because I'm too tired and I need to go rest. So really honoring yourself.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head, Alta, about the boundaries thing. I think a lot of us struggle with saying no and realizing that no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And sticking to that. We say yes to everybody else, but no to ourselves. And we've got to learn to flip that, because I'm the same with you, Alta. I mean, I only take client calls on certain days during the week. Mondays and Fridays are Portia's days. I am not taking no client calls, and Mondays are my therapy days. So I definitely ain't taking no calls from anybody, because that's my day for healing, for obviously holding space for me, because sometimes therapy can be a doozy. So I have to be able to hold that space for myself to rejuvenate, to rest, all of the things. So on that note, I digress there.
Okay. I'm like, I have so much to say about that, holding space for yourself and boundaries. So the reason I think people have issues with boundaries is because we're not setting it from a place of self-love. A lot of people set boundaries from a space of anger, frustration, resentment, all of those things. And those boundaries don't have space for growth, for change, for flexibility. And so if you are someone listening and you have difficulty setting boundaries around yourself, start thinking about them from a self-love perspective, honoring yourself. Like, I'm setting this boundary because I love myself and I want to live a healthy life. I want to be able to show up fully for everyone when I can. And in order to do so, I have to set boundaries from a space that is loving to me, that is from a space of love. So not a space of hatred, like I can't stand this person, I hate it when they do this, or da-da-da, not those types of boundaries, but like, I'm really tired. And, I'm looking at my schedule for the week, and so-and-so asked me to cook dinner on Friday, and I'm really working hard Monday through Thursday, and Friday's my only day. I think I really want to rest. And so you might just say to the person, I'm sorry, I really would love to do that, but I can't. I really, really can't. Is there any way that I can contribute? Right. So like that's a boundary from a place of self-love. And that's the way that I would help people work through that.
Yeah, we gotta really identify. Again, it goes back to that conscious decision. It boils down to, what do you really want? We tell ourselves that we want different, right? We want change, but let's be honest, we keep falling into that hamster wheel because we're too afraid to take the risk to change, right? So we're going to stay in this boat. We imprison ourselves.
Yes. You just said a doozy of a doozy of a doozy, right? Because we need to take a risk. People need to understand that not doing anything is also a risk. That is also a risk. You're choosing to stay where you are, to live how you've been living, to suffer if you're suffering in the way that you've been suffering, not seeking out support, community, whatever, right? Because down to the food you eat can serve to heal you or serve to harm you. And so I love what you just said about risk. And risk is everywhere. It's all the time. It's inevitable. And one of the things that I can't remember the documentary that I saw it in, but it was so amazing. And it was just like, people spend forever trying to figure out what's the right decision, not realizing that any decision is the right decision, because what happens next is either going to propel you forward or is going to teach you a lesson to help you propel forward. So the point of life is just make a choice.
Yes.
And then go with it and see where it takes you.
Yes. Remember, any decision is the right one, but you have to really ask yourself, what do you really want? Do I want to stay here in the same space another year? Or do I want to take the risk and live the life that I truly desire?
Right. Right.
So everybody, that was your intuitive trauma coach herself, Miss Alta Felix, that you heard from. And that concludes another episode of Grew with Portia, everybody. Thanks for listening and have a good evening.